Hello, Manu. Great to have you here again.
Thank you very much for having me.
Cool. So this time we're talking about a little bit different subject than last time. You recently published an article called Teaching Towards the Unknown. And in this article, you're obviously talking about teaching and education. And you open the article by calling every teacher a time traveler, which is someone who sends human beings forward into a world they cannot see yet. And that's either one of the most beautiful descriptions of teaching I've ever heard, or the most stressful job description ever written. So how would you characterize it?
As an educator, as a parent, um, I feel that our responsibility to give tools for our children, to create a toolbox full of tools that they would use sometime in the future in their life, and those tools will enable them to be successful. And the question is, what tools would they need? So, for example, one of the reasons that I chose to come to America was to give my kids perfect English because I believed that English is international language and probably it's going to be the international language in the future. And there's a bet. I don't know if it will be, whether it will be Chinese or English. I don't know. 100 years ago, it was German and French, but now it's English. So things change. But I made a bet and I said, probably it's going to be English. And therefore, what can I do to give them that tool? And we came to America. So as an educator, we are repeating that process again and again and again. Do they need math? Do they need mathematical thinking? Do they need language? Do they need um, the ability to write or to author? Something a little bit more complex than just have a conversation. Do they need to analyze a text? Do they need to be able to analyze an academical article? Do they need to know foundation knowledge about history, about culture, and so on and so forth? And all of these are bets. These are tools. Maybe they will use them, maybe not. If you look at your own education, there's probably handfuls of things that you've learned that you've never used, or
Correct.
you
Very
don't
correct.
think that you've used. But
Yes.
someone in your past thought that it's worthwhile to invest in teaching you that. So maybe you will teach that in the future. So in a way, we are time traveler. We are trying to guess what will be the world where our children are gonna live in 20 years, and what capabilities, what skills, and what knowledge would they need to be successful in that world.
Okay, but looking at our education many years back, and I don't want to date myself right now, a lot of that stuff was foundational education that you may not use it every day in your life today, but you understand it or you had a good enough understanding to build on top of it. Now, you quote Richard Riley, the former US Secretary of Education, in your article, and he said, "We are preparing students for jobs that don't yet exist, using technologies that haven't been invented to solve problems we haven't yet identified." And then you connect it to something almost counterintuitive. You say, change is the only constant, and we're bad at it. And the future is unknowable. Humans are literally wired to resist change. So, what are we supposed to teach if, we don't even know how to identify the problems that we will have in, not 20 years from now, but, with the evolution of AI, I'm looking 3 and 5 years ahead, and it's going to be hard to know what problems we're going to need to solve then.
That's challenging to be a teacher today, 100%. 100 years ago, you would know that there's going to be a profession called lawyer or blacksmith or plumber or whatnot, and you'd know which skills that they would need, and you'd teach them, and you're good. And today, you don't even know what profession is going to be in 20 years or in even 5 years, and you don't know the technologies, and you don't know the problems, and pretty much don't know anything. So how would you teach? That's a challenge. And from that challenge, we sit back and think, and we try to find the certainties that we can bet on, that we know that will be relevant, even though we do not know the details, but we do know the trend, or we do know the atmosphere, the environment. And what we can say is that change is accelerating.
Yes.
And we also can say that we as humans hate uncertainty. And uncertainty and change is something that we can handle, we can adapt, but we don't like to adapt. Now, when there are instincts that we have, that are infused in us, they're us. We as natural creatures, we as humans, we with years in evolution, we do not like change because we are wired for safety. And change is not very safe because you don't know, you have the uncertainty. When we have such instinct, but we have to overcome an instinct, this is where education comes. This is where you develop a skill.
You say that, but there's also a part in the article where you talk about the Faustian bargain, which is basically, well, people adapt to change, but they adapt to it for at a price, right?
Yes.
And so tell me a little bit about this price that we're paying here.
So, how you adapt to change, or how do you deal with problems? So either you develop your internal skill, your internal capability, which can be a cognitive capability, is something in your brain. So you develop the ability to adapt to change, even though it's hard. And sometimes you would just use technology because technology gives you power. There is a problem, and I can find a technological solution to that problem, and I'm good. I need to get from A to B, and I could run, I could walk, and I can take a car, or I can fly, right? And if my problem is that I need to get from A to B as fast as possible, a technological solution is a great means to solve that problem. I need to grow food, so agriculture is hard. All right, so let's invent a machine that will simplify the process. I needed to wash my clothes instead of going to the river. I use a washing machine. Technological solution, problem solving. But when you solve a problem and the value is quick and easy and obvious, what is less obvious is that there's impact on you. The fact that you don't deal with that problem and use a technology to deal with that, to solve that problem for you, now lessen your ability to actually solve that problem yourself. You lose a capability because you don't use it anymore.
Yeah,
You
because
see
if
it
we don't need to walk 10 miles per day to get from one place to the other, muscle atrophy, right? Very
exactly,
simple.
exactly, exactly. So you will lose a capability, whether it's going to be physical or whether it is cognitive. And this is what's interesting in the digital world is if before the digital world, all of these capabilities were physical. You don't wash your clothes in the river, you use a washing machine, so you do less physical work at home, and you lose muscle atrophy. Exactly. And you know how to compensate for that by going to the gym.
And now with everything which happens in AI, it's not muscle and atrophy, it's a little bit of brain atrophy, right?
Exactly.
And so, but this, according to your article, this is not equal everywhere. You have this value pyramid, right? And I mean, we can go through this pyramid really quickly, but one thing that I wanted to maybe think about a little bit more is you mentioned inventors there. and we also have visionaries. So how do you see the difference between inventors and visionaries here in that
But,
in that space?
let's describe that value pyramid first, and
Okay.
for our listeners to give them a context.
Yeah.
So we mentioned that we don't know the future, and we mentioned that we know a few certainties, and we know one certainty is that change is accelerating, and we need to develop a skill to deal with that change. Another certainty that we can tell is that value can be organized in what's called that value pyramid. And in the future of work, if our educators are preparing us for a work we don't know, for a future we don't know, and we don't know the technology and we don't know the problems, but we can use that value organization to understand where should we invest, not specifically on which profession or which tool or which technology, which, as we said, we don't know. And that's very tactical. It's not strategic. But if we're thinking strategic,
Mhm.
we would know where to double down on those value propositions. And so looking at all value, and that's true for thousands of years in all societies, this is not new to technology and probably will not change with technology, is that first you have those people who make the, do the job, the get the job done. And that can be in any industry. That could be a plumber, that could be an electrician, that could be a mechanic, and that could be a software engineer or a lawyer. It could be a knowledge engineer or a physical or knowledge work or physical work. That's just doing the job. And that's the foundation of economy. Will always be, always was, always will be. Now, some of the things that we do, some of the to get the job done is more technical, less fun, a little bit boring. We as humans, we do not excel in that. Like we do not excel in physical work at the field. We do not excel in repetitive document summary or knowledge work. It's just boring. And that it is what it is, but we do it because there's no other way. Now, if you can introduce automation there, then we do less physical work, and thus we'll do less knowledge work because it can be automated. So the getting the job done, the execution, some of it can be automated, not all of it, depending in robotics or depending in the technology and field. But to just execute a task, some tasks are not really meant for us as humans because it's just boring for us. It's
Mhm.
repetitive. We're not very good at that. And it can be automated. We'll automate it. And so you'll see less and less knowledge works doing those repetitive tasks.
Yeah.
That's one value proposition. Another value is coordination. Well, that
Mhm.
manager that tells you what to do. And that coordination involves pretty deep thinking, like what should go next, and to understand dependencies and dependency graphs. Mathematically, these are very complex problems. Some of them are unsolvable. In supply chain, what I did in Walmart, we needed to coordinate trucks, moving inventory from all Walmart stores. To coordinate that's hard.
Yes.
That's hard. And you apply, humans cannot do it.
Yeah. At that scale, that's probably very, very hard to do manually.
So it is hard, and at some scale, you'll apply an algorithm.
Mhm.
But there's a lot there in coordination. There's communication. There's quite a bit in management, but some management also will be automated because we get to scale that humans cannot comprehend. On top of that, there's communication. Communication are artists. Communications are teachers. Communications are the managers, to execute communication with their employees. There's empathy there. A therapist communicates. And yes, you can do therapy, automated therapy, but it lacks that empathy. And empathy, the hug, that human experience is something we look for as humans.
Mhm.
It has this magic that attracts us as humans. This is something that will never be, or most probably, you never say never, most probably will not be automated, because that's part of us. That communication, that human, feeling, that sense of closeness. And on top of that, there's imagination. The one thing uh, that distinguishes us from the rest of from any species is that we have imagination, and our world is mostly imaginary. Money is imaginary, state is imaginary. These are concepts that we imagine, and that's what makes us human. And when we invent new things, we imagine a new world. If the Wright brothers, they invented um, flights. They've invented the airplane. They invented the whole science of flying.
Yeah, and let me just inject here. If we would have ChatGPT or any AI tool in 1902, for example, and we would ask it if flight would be possible, it would just look back, analyze all the data available, and say, nope, probably not. But the inventiveness and tenacity of humans actually brought us that. And ironically, the tenacity and the inventiveness of humans also brought us AI. So inventiveness and being actually kind of visionary, if we're going by your article, is really important.
Yeah, and it's a circle. We can use AI to promote more creativity. AI does what we call convolutional creativity, because it mixes things together,
Mhm.
but it does not create something completely new. It does not take a blank canvas, and creates the Mona Lisa. It's something that comes from us, from our imagination, from our source of humanity. That is the foundation of humanity, and that's vision, because in vision we imagine the future. Now you would say maybe you need to be I don't know, Michelangelo to be an inventor, or the Wright brother, um, but apparently it's not the case, because this is the foundation of humanity. So everyone imagines. Everyone has a sense of vision and a sense of creativity. We
It
just need
is
to promote it.
it is basically in all of us. And um, before we get to how we use it in education, let me just ask you also talk about the great cognitive divide, and you kind of you very stark on that. And you say that those who surrender get quietly diminished, and they won't notice it until this gap that they have created for themselves is unbridgeable. So yeah.
And that's, the technology deal comes into action in AI, because that's the impact of AI on us. It changes us
Mhm.
physically,
Yeah.
literally physically. It changes our brain. It changes our wiring, so to speak.
It's
Um,
a bit like when smartphones came along, we started forgetting all the phone numbers. I mean, I used to know tens of phone numbers by heart. Today, I barely know three or four.
exactly, exactly. So we're thinking, okay, all the information is available to everyone. If 20 years ago, um, you would say that an expert is someone who knows a certain fact. You know a certain fact about the law, so you are an expert in law. And you know a certain fact about medicine, so you are an expert physician or whatnot. Now everybody knows everything, because it's all in ChatGPT. Right? You just ask Gemini, and Gemini will find the relevant information, and most probably will give you good enough information. Maybe it's even going to be accurate. And With
But
models,
this
it gets better and better.
but this information is also uh, very much tied to how you ask the question and how critical you are of its answers, right?
Absolutely. That's the beauty. So the information is there. Now, if everybody has access to that information, does this mean now that everybody are equal? There are no experts anymore because it's just there.
That's an interesting concept, yeah.
That's an interesting question. But we don't see that. We don't see that average, that we all become average. We see exactly the opposite. We see that some people become more expert or more intelligent, and they can deliver. We can see that they produce more complex artifacts that eventually are cognitive artifacts, and the other are diminished. They go down. They do less. They do less because they think less. And it changes our brain because we get an answer. We don't question that answer. We don't question the thought. We are not executing thought. We
Mhm.
are writing an article by just prompting chat, write me an article, get the article, cut and paste. That's it. That's my essay. So we did not invest any cognitive power in producing that, in actually writing, which is hard. It is hard to write a good article. And if we don't do that, we lose the capability, we lose the skill. And not only that, we lose the self-confidence of the ability to generate something of a value. That creates some people, a divide where some people outsource their thinking, and like any technology deal, you don't execute it, it atrophies, atrophy. So it goes down, it's diminished. You have less. And others are applying critical thinking together with AI as a partner. They have long conversations with AI, and sometimes they challenge AI, and there's back and forth, etc. And they use the power of AI to improve their thought process. They are amplified. That creates a gap. And that gap will most probably be translated into a financial gap because some will produce more and they will be compensated for that more. And some will produce less and most probably they'll get less. So the inequality that we feel today in our society that affects our politics and our everyday life, and we all complain about it, is going to be a joke when that inequality is going to be powered by really cognitive gap that AI or irresponsible use of AI is going to generate. That's the big cognitive divide.
Okay, so in order to kind of not go there, not have this cognitive divide, what you're also discussing in your article is what you call the adaptability quotient, which is a skill that everybody needs today per the article. And this is kind of contradicted to this evolutionary stability that we always were looking for. And I want to challenge it a little bit different. Is this adaptability quotient something that is basically just becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable?
It is hard, and whenever it's hard, it's a skill that you need to develop. So you need to know how to handle change, even though it's hard. Only today, my daughter, um, she had a whole plan for her day, and we forgot to tell her that she has a dance class. We just forgot. And then I'm coming and I want to bring her to dance, to take her to dance, and she said, "No, there's no dance." There is dance. But I already have my old days planned out, and she wasn't able to get herself to deviate from her plan, to adapt her plan. She had the time, no problem,
Mhm.
but she wasn't able to adapt, and that's a red alarm to me. That's I have something to work on because she doesn't have that ability to adapt, and life will push adaptability at her face. She will need to adapt. So if you do not know how to adapt today, and to handle the difficulty in adaptation, you will struggle in the future.
So, but basically what you're saying, what we're saying here is, well, we have this evolutionary need for stability, but with all the technology that is developing these days, we want to take these million years of evolutionary programming and change it in the classroom on a Tuesday, you know?
That's what makes us human. We do it all the time. We have all of our instincts. That's our ID. That's what psychological is called. That's our ID, and that's what drives us. These are our instincts. But we control our instincts because we are educated people.
Mhm.
And we control those instincts by education. We build values, and those values quite often override our instincts. But we need to invest that education. We need to build those values. So this is exactly the role of education and an educator. That's their responsibility, to build that cognitive foundation that will allow us to override our instinct for stability and our hate for for change that is part of us, but we'll build the skill with a lot of work next Tuesday. But it's going to be a journey. With my daughter, I can tell you it's going to be a long journey. Um, but we need to build that skill, because tomorrow change will be faster than we can ever imagine. We see it today. It's happening today.
So you're bringing up all these kind of contrasting things, which is the need for stability, but also with what happens today, the need to adaptability, the humanity that we need and that we're tied to, and the human intervention. What I like about this article is you actually come up with a solution, or a at least a very big step for educators to use in order to adapt and in order to basically move your idea forward. And I love it. It's called the blank page test.
Yeah, that was.
And just, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about myself in the classroom when I was a child and getting a blank page by a teacher, and here is your test. Uh, it's inconceivable. So tell me a bit about it.
In one sentence, I would tell to educators: incentivize critical thinking, incentivize the question, do not incentivize the answer. So our regular test that we've all taken so many times is incentivizing us just to spit up the answer. That's all. We ask a question, we come with the answer. Maybe it's a long answer, maybe it's just a number, informative answer. It's just the answer. But it doesn't incentivize us to think critically. With the with the blank page test, the kids learn about questions. The kids learn about importance of questions, the type of question, the strategy of questions, etc. And then the teacher tells them, I'm going to give you 70% from, I'm going to grade the test by giving you 70% on the quality of the questions and only 30% on the quality of your answers, because I want to incentivize the question. How deep that question is, how does it well cover the topic, does it promote other questions? So we build a rubric with the teacher. By the way, we work with AI to develop that rubric.
Of course.
And
Naturally.
because for every teacher it's going to be different. But eventually we build a rubric that helps the teacher grade that test. But we give the kids the freedom to demonstrate their knowledge in their own way, to demonstrate their thinking in their own way, to prove that they know that particular topic in their own way. And we are doubling down on creativity. We are doubling down on communication. We are doubling down on imagination. All of these qualities that we understand that are human qualities. This is what we excel at. This is us being, this is the quality that we bring to the table. We're less technical. That's AI, that's automation. But
Yes.
creativity and communication and our own imagination, telling a story that eventually translates into a math problem, but that's my story. This is something that kids appreciate. So it becomes beautiful for the teacher to grade that test because he gets so many different stories. Um, and it's great for the kids because they cannot say that was a hard test. Well, you wrote it, right?
Yes.
um, and they cannot say yeah, I was tricked. It was a tricky test, or so on and so forth. All of the excuses that kids will tell. It's about you find your own way to prove that you know that particular topic. It gives them the freedom, it gives them the power, and it incentivizes the kids to think. And that's what we need in the era of AI.
And another thing that I saw in the article is that you mentioned the Socratic method. It's a 3,000-year-old method. And what you're saying is even in the age of AI, it is still relevant. Or is it maybe more relevant today than ever?
Absolutely. The idea of the question at the center. Wonder is the source of wisdom, Socrates says. That's a 3,000 years old idea. Being humble about what we know and what we do not know, and open the space to ask these questions. This is what creates progress. This is the source. This is the foundation of the scientific process or the scientific model. So these ideas are not new. But at school, we became more and more mechanic because it's just easy. But today, we have no choice. We have to adapt the perspective of our education because the skill we need to give our kids for the future that we do not know is the ability to think critically, is the ability to ask a good question that could be written as a prompt or as a story, whatnot. But that question will make them successfully, most probably, in the future that we do not know.
So let me maybe tie this into the age of AI. We have the Socratic workflow, which is a workflow.
Yes,
It is just that we now have better technology to use that workflow. So the process, the workflow stayed the same, but the data or the way we obtain this data and the how fast we obtain this data, that has basically changed. So
absolutely. No, at work now we have the ability to experiment, to take routes that are not known, to take crazy hypotheses, and
mhm,
maybe some of them will catch because now with automation we can run the experiment automatically. We just need to come with the hypothesis. So what was very expensive before to experiment, and many companies they limited the number of the experimentation that they allowed their employees to execute because of the price. It's
yep.
just, now the employee, a good software developer is not about writing code, but it's articulating that experiment that agents will execute. That's innovation.
Yeah. And so to tie it all together and to kind of, last question here is if an educator sees this interview and wants, tomorrow or next week, do something to advance and to get their students ready for the age of AI, what's the one concrete thing that they can do, you know, this week?
Very simple. First, they can do the blank page test. It's very simple to do. They can incentivize questions by giving their students extra credit in every assignment for a good question.
Mhm.
Giving them just that. Um, Let the kids use AI but to grade the deliverable, the product of that AI, not only by the product, but by the prompt and the conversation of multiple prompts with AI. So you tell the kids, look, if you are just prompting AI, you get a product, you get an essay, and you give me that essay, you're going to get zero. Not because of the essay, because there was no conversation.
Yeah.
Grade the kids about that conversation that demonstrate critical thinking, whether they actually read the output that AI gave, and then they gave their own remarks on it, and they had a back and forth, and eventually together they produced an article. So you give them some credit about the article, but most about the journey to that article. So you incentivize the journey, not the outcome.
Hmm.
The journey that matters, not the result.
Yes.
Um, so here it is in practice. These very simple exercises would shift that perspective of incentivizing critical thinking and incentivizing the questions. Of course, they can work with my organization, um, uh, Responsible AI in Education. Uh, we'll put the link to my website at the comments so they can work with us, and we deliver workshops that give all of this in detail and go deeper. But
Hmm.
just to change their perspective on the same curriculum, on the same instruction. Do not change your instruction, but change the perspective on the instruction and incentivize that critical thinking. That's something that any educator can do in their own way tomorrow morning.
That's actually amazing. And it's, I mean, looks to me pretty simple to spend a little time in the classroom on questions about the topic, asking the students if they can come up with really good questions.
Yeah, you do an assignment and you were stuck on something. I don't know, something did not work out for you, but you were able to come up with a good question about the topic and get that extra credit, and that would compensate for that assignment or that question that you didn't do well at. It's so simple. It gives the
Very
kids the
simple.
freedom, and that creativity. It promotes that creativity. And what I've seen in the schools I've worked at, it creates a conversation. People try to, they start to trade with questions. It's amazing to see what happens with just a little shift in perspective.
And what was the feedback? I mean, you met with a few teachers and you actually worked with a few educators on that with your organization. So, what was the feedback from these educators?
The kids loved it. The educators loved it. Um, it made them think. They said, you know what? Now I feel that my life mission is relevant.
That is an amazing thing, and I think with that quote, we will close this interview right now. And so, thank you so much, Manu, for your insights as always, and looking forward to the next time.
Thank you.